Hey, boys and girls. So I told you that we were going to be talking about figuring out what happens at the beginning, the middle, and the end of stories. You're going to be seeing this a lot this week. And so I want to go over real quickly, what might we talk about in the beginning of a story? Well, in the beginning of the story, we usually meet the characters and we find out where the setting is. Now, we know what characters are by now, and we know what a setting is. So, in the beginning, we usually talk about characters and setting. In the middle, we usually talk about what's happening to the characters, and there's usually a problem. Remember, a problem is something that goes wrong in the story, something that goes wrong. And at the end of the story, we want to see how that problem was solved. So who remembers that word? That's right, it's solution. And usually we talk about if the characters changed any or how they felt at the end of the story once it was solved. So we're going to do that today with our book. And our book is called Thank You, Amu. And it's by Olga Mora. She was the author who wrote the words and the illustrator who drew the pictures. So as I'm reading this story today, I'm going to stop throughout because that's what good readers do. And we're going to talk about maybe what happened in the beginning of the story, what happened in the middle, and what happened in the end. And I have another anchor chart that's going to help us. And your teacher is also going to do this with you in class. So I'm going to bring that anchor chart up. And as we're doing this, we're going to be thinking about the beginning. So I have a B for beginning, an M for the middle of the story, and an E for the ending of the story. So here we go. Let's start thinking about the characters and the setting that we notice at the beginning. On the corner of the First Street and Long Street, on the very top floor, Amu was cooking a thick red stew in a big fat pot for a nice evening meal. She seasoned and stirred it and took a small taste. What a delicious stew, Amu said. Tonight, dinner will surely be the best I've ever had. With that, Amu put down her spoon and went to read a book before supper. As the thick red stew simmered on the stove, its scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street, and around the block until, knock, someone was at the door. When Amu opened it, she saw. So I'm going to stop right here for our story. Let's think about this. What is she doing at the beginning of our story? So first we have to think, who is our character? So I want you to do this with your teacher if you're in class. Who is our character? So if you need to pause the video, you can. And what is she doing? Where, the setting, is she at? And when we do this, I'm going to add some sticky notes for the beginning. And your teacher can add some sticky notes with you. So one of the things that I noticed for the beginning is that Amu was cooking a stew. And I wonder what stew means. So Amu was cooking a stew. So I'm going to add that under beginning. Amu is our grandma. She looks like a grandma to me. And she's cooking a delicious stew. Well, stew is one of our vocabulary words. And I'm going to go ahead and show that to you. Stew is a dish like a soup. It's similar to a soup, and it's made with meat or fish, and they usually cook it really slowly. So I think a vegetable beef stew, where you might have a lot of vegetables and some beef, and then you get to eat it, and it's sort of like a soup. She also said one of our other words that you're going to hear a lot, and that is delicious. You know delicious means yummy, and it's delicious means it has a yummy taste or a yummy smell. Delicious. And then she also said another vocabulary word. Can you believe that? Waft. Now this one you might not know. Waft. So waft means an odor or a smell that's carried throughout the air. So think about when your mom's cooking dinner or grandma like Amu's cooking dinner, and you smell and you can smell what they're cooking because it's going through the air. It's wafting. Waft. So I can smell it because it's in the air. Also, this might not be a very good smell, but think about when you're riding in a car and all of a sudden you get a stinky smell. Oh, because a skunk has been close by. It wafted past you. That means it was through the air. Okay, so we're going to keep reading and you're going to talk about some of the beginning parts with your teacher. All right. So when Amu opened it, she saw a little boy. Amu exclaimed, "What brings you to my home?" "I was playing with my race car down the hall when I smelled the most delicious smell." The little boy replied, "What is it?" "Thick red stew." Stew," he sighed. "That sure sounds yummy." So now I want you to be thinking about some things that are happening in the middle of the story. We know Amu is our main character, and she's made a stew. Amu thought for a moment. She was saving her stew for dinner, but she had made quite a bit. It would not hurt me to share. Would you like some?" The little boy nodded. And so Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Amu," the little boy said, and went on his way. With that, Amu closed the door and went back to her book. As she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall and towards the street, and around the block. So look at the little boy. It's wafting through the air. Knock, knock. Someone was at the door. When Amu opened the door, this time, she saw a police officer. "Miss Police Officer," Amu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" "I was on duty down the street when I smelled the most delicious smell," said the police officer. "What is it?" "Thick red stew." "Ah, stew," she said, and her mouth watered. "That sounds mighty tasty." Amu thought for a moment. There was still enough to share. "Would you like some?" The police officer nodded. Once again, Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Amu," the officer said, and went on her way. And so, for the second time, Amu closed the door and went back to her book. Sure enough, as she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, towards the street, and around the block, until 3 knocks this time. Again, someone was at Amu's door, and this time she opened it. She saw... Who do you think this person right here might be? Because I'm going to make a guess that he might be next. Oh, a hot dog vendor. "Mr. Hot Dog Vendor," Amu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" "I was selling my hot dogs down the block when I smelled the most delicious scent." Mr. Hot Dog Vendor replied, "What is it?" Now I'm going to stop right here. Do you think I was right? I wasn't. Sometimes even when we make a guess or we predict, we may not be right, and that is okay. I did that because I wanted to show you just because you predict and you get it wrong doesn't mean you're not trying. It actually was the hot dog man right back here. "I was selling my hot dogs down the block when I smelled the most delicious smell." "It's the thick red stew." "Oh, stew." The vendor licked his lips. That sounds delectable. So Amu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. Thank you, Amu, the hot dog vendor said, and went on his way. Throughout the day, people from all across the neighborhood knocked on Amu's door. She fed a shop owner, a cab driver, a doctor, an actor, a lawyer, a dancer, a baker, an artist, a singer, an athlete, a bus driver, a construction worker, and even the mayor of the town stopped by. And each time they knocked, Amu shared. Were there lots of people stopping to ask Amu for some delicious stew? It was. Soon the sky darkened, the streetlights brightened, and it was finally time for dinner. But when Amu opened her big fat pot of thick red stew for her nice evening meal, it was empty. Amu sniffled. There goes the best dinner I ever had. Sorry and blue, she sat at the table with her empty pot until... Who could that be? Amu wondered. So I want you to pause right here with your teacher, and if you're at home, I want you to be thinking about some of the things that happened in the middle of the story. There were lots of things that happened in the middle of the story that led us to our problem. So Miss Bumgarner's going to write one of those things down, and then you're going to do some of this with your teacher. So in the middle of the story, boys and girls, be thinking about all the events that happened. Well, I know that Amu shared her stew with a little boy. And your teachers may even draw the pictures too, because as good readers, if we don't know how to write the words yet, we can always draw the pictures. And then your teacher's going to talk about some more things that happened in the middle of the story. So I know that Amu shared her stew with a little boy. I also know she probably shared it with a lot of other people too. All right, let's keep reading because now we're going to find out the ending of the story. So when she opened the door, she saw the little boy, the police officer, the hot dog vendor, the shop owner, the cab driver, the doctor, the actor, the lawyer, the dancer, the baker. Why, everyone she fed today was at her door. I'm sorry, everyone, Amu sighed. My thick red stew is all gone, and I have nothing left to share. The little boy tugged at Amu's sleeve. Don't worry, Amu. We're not here to ask. We are here to give. The police officer carried in a fresh salad. The mayor entered with a roast chicken. The baker brought a collection of sweet goodies, and even the little boy presented Amu with something special in a shiny red envelope. Everyone who had knocked on Amu's door that day squeezed inside her tiny apartment, and together they ate, danced, and celebrated. While Amu's big fat pot of thick red stew was empty, her heart was full of happiness and love. That dinner was the best she had ever had. And look, the little boy made her a thank you card. He was showing good manners. So at the end of the story, what did they do? You're going to do this part with your teacher as well. I noticed that Amu's problem was that she ran out of stew, so that made her feel blue. And blue is our last vocabulary word, to feel sad or unhappy. But at the end of the story, all of the people she shared her stew with came back, and they had a big meal for Amu. So I'm going to write that. Amu had a big meal with her neighbors. She was happy. Okay, so you're going to finish this with your teacher. We're going to be doing a lot of this week.